The dust-covered road stretched endlessly across the parched terrain as Zachary Gallagher's stagecoach rattled toward River's Edge, the small frontier town that would become her reluctant home. The year was 1875, and the 22-year-old had left behind everything familiar in Boston after her father's unexpected death left the family destitute, forcing her to accept her only option, a teaching position in the untamed Western Territory. Zara wiped a bead of sweat from her brow, her delicate fingers clutching the worn leather journal in her lap. The summer heat was relentless, seeping through the canvas cover of the coach despite the early morning hour. She had been traveling for nearly 2 weeks, each passing day taking her further from civilization as she knew it and deeper into what felt like another world entirely. Almost there. "Miss Gallagher," the driver called down, his voice gruff from years of shouting over thundering hooves and creaking wheels. "River's Edge, just beyond that next ridge." Relief washed over her as she peered through the small window. The landscape had gradually changed over the past few days, the flat, barren plains giving way to rolling hills dotted with scrub brush, and the occasional cluster of cottonwood trees. In the distance, a ribbon of blue-green water snaked its way through the countryside, the Sawmill River, which gave the town its name. "Thank heavens," she murmured to herself, smoothing the wrinkles from her traveling dress. The simple navy cotton was practical for the journey, but still maintained a sense of Eastern propriety. Zara had packed carefully, bringing only what she could carry herself, which meant leaving behind most of the fine dresses and trinkets that had once filled her wardrobe. The stagecoach lurched to a halt, dust billowing around them as the driver set the brake. "River's Edge, miss," he announced, jumping down to open the door. "Your new home." Zara stepped out, her boots touching western soil for the first time as she took in her surroundings. River's Edge was hardly the savage wilderness she had imagined in her darkest moments of doubt, but neither was it Boston. A single dirt road served as the main street, lined with wooden buildings weathered by sun and time. A general store, a saloon, a small church, and what appeared to be a schoolhouse stood among various other establishments. Several townsfolk paused in their daily activities to observe the newcomer, a common occurrence when the stagecoach arrived with fresh faces from the east. Zara straightened her posture and lifted her chin slightly, determined to make a favorable impression despite her travel-worn appearance. "Miss Gallagher?" A middle-aged woman with kind eyes approached, her calico dress covered by a practical apron. "I'm Martha Wilson, wife of the town mayor. We've been expecting you." Zara offered a grateful smile. "Yes, that's me. Thank you for meeting me, Mrs. Wilson." "Call me Martha, dear. Everyone does." The woman gestured toward a modest buggy parked nearby. "I'll take you to the boarding house where you'll be staying. Mrs. Peterson has prepared a room for you there." As they made their way through town, Martha provided a running commentary on the various establishments and inhabitants. Zara tried to commit the information to memory, though her exhaustion made focusing difficult. "The schoolhouse is just down that way," Martha pointed out. 28 children of various ages. Our last teacher left, rather suddenly married a cattle baron from up north." "I look forward to meeting my students," Zara replied, though her stomach tightened at the thought of managing nearly 30 children of different ages and educational backgrounds. Martha patted her hand reassuringly. "You'll do just fine, dear. We're simply grateful to have an educated young woman willing to come all this way." The boarding house was a 2-story wooden structure with a wide front porch. Inside, it was simple but clean, with faded wallpaper and well-worn furniture that spoke of years of use. "Miss Gallagher has arrived," Martha announced to the thin, gray-haired woman who emerged from the back of the house. "Welcome, Miss Gallagher. I'm Edith Peterson." The older woman's handshake was surprisingly firm. "I've prepared your room upstairs, first door on the right. Meals are served promptly at 7, noon, and 6. On Sundays, breakfast is at 8 to accommodate church services." "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. I appreciate your hospitality." "We'll let you get settled," Martha said. "School begins Monday morning at 8 o'clock sharp. That gives you 3 days to rest from your journey and prepare." After they left, Zara climbed the narrow staircase to her room. It was small but tidy, containing a single bed, a washstand with a porcelain basin, a small writing desk, and a narrow wardrobe. The window overlooked the main street, providing a view of the town's daily activities. Exhausted, she sank onto the bed, allowing herself a moment of doubt. What had she been thinking, coming to this remote place so far from everything familiar? Could she truly build a life here among strangers? Her father's words came back to her. Gallaghers don't surrender to circumstances. We rise above them. With renewed determination, Zara stood and began unpacking her meager belongings. This was her life now, and she would make the best of it. The following days passed in a blur of introductions and preparations. Zara familiarized herself with the town, inventoried the schoolhouse supplies, and developed lesson plans for her diverse group of students. The townspeople were generally welcoming, though some regarded her with a suspicion often reserved for educated Easterners. By Sunday evening, she felt reasonably prepared for her first day of teaching. After dinner at the boarding house, she decided to take a walk along the river to clear her mind before the important day ahead. The evening air had cooled considerably, offering relief from the day's heat. The Sawmill River was wider than it had appeared from a distance, its waters flowing steadily between grassy banks dotted with wildflowers. Zara followed a well-worn path that meandered alongside the water, enjoying the peaceful sounds of nature after weeks of travel and busy preparations. She had walked perhaps a mile when she noticed a small clearing by the riverbank, perfect for sitting and watching the sunset reflect on the water. As she settled on a fallen log, movement across the river caught her attention. A rider on horseback was approaching the water's edge, a tall man on a magnificent chestnut stallion. Even from this distance, there was something striking about the figure. He sat straight in the saddle with the easy confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime on horseback. His broad-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but she could see that he wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy: denim trousers, a faded shirt, and a leather vest. Zara watched as the man guided his horse toward a shallow section of the river, clearly intending to cross. The stallion stepped carefully into the water, which initially reached only to its knees. The rider patted the animal's neck encouragingly as they ventured deeper. What happened next occurred with alarming speed. The horse had reached the middle of the river when it suddenly stumbled, perhaps caught by an unseen current or stepping into a deeper section. The animal whinnied in distress, rearing up as it lost its footing. "Steady, Phoenix! Steady!" The man's voice carried across the water as he attempted to regain control. The horse panicked, thrashing in the water as the current began to carry it downstream. The rider fought to stay in the saddle, but was eventually thrown into the churning water. The horse managed to break free from the deeper section and scrambled toward the opposite bank from where Zara sat, disappearing into the trees. The man surfaced several yards downstream, struggling against the current. Zara rose to her feet, heart pounding as she watched him fight his way toward the shore, her side of the river. Without hesitation, she ran along the bank, keeping pace with his progress through the water. "This way!" she called, waving her arms. "The current is weaker here." The stranger didn't waste breath responding, but changed his trajectory slightly, angling toward where she stood. Zara scrambled down closer to the water's edge, ready to help if needed. After what seemed like an eternity, but was likely only minutes, the man reached shallower water where he could stand. He waded the remaining distance, water streaming from his clothes as he finally emerged onto solid ground. His hat was gone, revealing dark hair plastered to his head. He dropped to his knees on the grassy bank, breathing heavily. "Are you all right?" Zara asked, keeping a respectable distance but close enough to offer assistance if necessary. He looked up, and Zara found herself staring into the most startling blue eyes she'd ever seen, vivid as a summer sky and currently filled with a mixture of gratitude and frustration. "I'm fine, madam," he said between breaths, his voice deep with a slight drawl, "though my pride and my best hat are both damaged beyond repair." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Zara couldn't help but smile at his attempt at humor. "Your horse ran off toward the other bank." "Phoenix?" he said with a sigh, getting to his feet. Water dripped from his sodden clothing as he surveyed the opposite shore. "That blasted animal has more spirit than sense sometimes." Now standing, the man was even taller than she had initially thought, towering over her by at least a foot. His features were striking: a strong jaw darkened with stubble, high cheekbones, and those remarkable blue eyes set beneath straight brows. He was handsome in a rugged, weathered way that spoke of a life lived outdoors. "I'm Zara Gallagher," she introduced herself, suddenly conscious of her own appearance. "I just arrived in River's Edge a few days ago." "The new school teacher," he said with a nod, surprising her with his knowledge. "Word travels fast in small towns." He extended a dripping hand. "Knox Everett. Most folks call me Knox. I own the Triple E Ranch about 5 miles north of town." Zara shook his hand, noting the calluses that spoke of hard physical labor, despite his status as a ranch owner. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Everett, though I wish it were under drier circumstances." He chuckled, the sound warm and unexpected. "Just Knox, please. And I apologize for the dramatic introduction." He glanced across the river again, concern etched on his features. "That horse cost me nearly a year's profits, not to mention he's the finest horse I've ever trained." "Will he find his way home?" Zara asked. Knox shook his head. "Not likely. He's still young and doesn't know this area well. I was breaking in a new trail when we crossed paths with a rattlesnake. Spooked him into the river before I could get him under control." Zara followed his gaze across the water. "What will you do now?" "I need to get across and track him before dark," Knox replied, then looked down at his drenched clothing. "Though, I'd rather not go back in that water if I can help it." "There's a bridge about a mile downstream near town," Zara offered. "I could show you." Knox hesitated, clearly weighing the time it would take against the fading daylight. Finally, he nodded. "I'd be much obliged, Miss Gallagher." As they walked, Zara became acutely aware of the impropriety of her situation, alone with a strange man, far from town, with evening approaching. Yet something about Knox Everett's straightforward manner put her at ease. "So, Boston?" he asked as they followed the path. Zara looked at him in surprise. "How did you know?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Your accent and your posture. Eastern ladies have a certain way of carrying themselves that's different from women who grew up out here. I suppose I'm rather obvious then." "It's not a criticism," he assured her. "Just an observation. What brings a Boston lady to our little corner of nowhere?" Zara hesitated, uncomfortable with sharing her family's financial collapse with a stranger. "A teaching opportunity," she said simply, "and a chance for adventure." Knox glanced at her, his expression suggesting he recognized her deflection, but wouldn't press further. "Well, you've certainly found your adventure today." They reached the wooden bridge as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. Knox paused before crossing. "You should head back to town now," he said. "It'll be dark soon, and Mrs. Peterson will have the whole town out looking for you if you miss supper. What about you? Will you be able to find your horse in the dark?" "I've tracked animals in worse conditions," he replied with confidence, "and I know Phoenix's habits. He'll be looking for water and grass, which narrows down the possibilities." Zara nodded, strangely reluctant to part ways. "Good luck, Mr. Everett Knox. I hope you find him." "Thank you for your help, Miss Gallagher. I'm sure our paths will cross again." He tipped an imaginary hat, smiled, then strode across the bridge, his wet boots leaving damp footprints on the wooden planks. Zara watched him disappear into the gathering dusk before turning back toward town, her thoughts in disarray. Her first day of teaching was tomorrow, and she needed to focus on that, not on blue-eyed cowboys with charming smiles. Yet, as she prepared for bed that night, Knox Everett's face kept appearing in her mind. There was something compelling about him that went beyond his obvious physical appeal, a straightforwardness, a lack of pretension that was refreshing after the carefully mannered society she had left behind. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself, plumping her pillow with more force than necessary. "You've exchanged perhaps 20 sentences with the man." Still, as sleep claimed her, she couldn't help but wonder if he had found his horse, and if their paths would indeed cross again, as he had predicted. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through her window. Zara dressed carefully in her most professional attire, a high-necked blouse of pale blue cotton and a dark gray skirt that fell in neat pleats to her ankles. She pinned her hair in a simple but tidy chignon and added her mother's cameo brooch as her only adornment. Breakfast at the boarding house was a hurried affair, with Mrs. Peterson offering encouraging words as Zara ate quickly. "The children can be a handful," the older woman warned, "but they're good at heart, especially the Miller's 3 bright as new pennies, those ones." Zara arrived at the schoolhouse 30 minutes early to organize her materials and write the day's lessons on the blackboard. The building was simple but functional, with rows of wooden desks facing a larger desk at the front. Bookshelves lined one wall, though they contained far fewer volumes than she was accustomed to. As the clock approached 8, children began filing in, some eager, some reluctant, all curious about their new teacher. They ranged in age from 6 to 16, with clothing that varied from near rags to simple but well-maintained attire that spoke of different economic circumstances. "Good morning," Zara greeted them, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I am Miss Gallagher, your new teacher." 28 pairs of eyes stared back at her, with expressions ranging from interest to open skepticism. A girl of about 14 with auburn braids whispered something to her neighbor, who giggled behind her hand. "We will begin with introductions," Zara continued, undeterred. "When I call your name from the register, please stand and tell me one thing about yourself." The morning progressed better than she had feared. Most of the children were respectful, if reserved, and seemed willing to give her a chance. By midday, she had assessed their various educational levels and begun to formulate a teaching strategy that would challenge the advanced students while supporting those who needed additional help. As the children filed out for their lunch break, Zara sank into her chair with relief. The morning had gone reasonably well, but maintaining order while teaching multiple subjects to different age groups simultaneously was even more challenging than she had anticipated. A knock at the open doorway startled her. She looked up to find Knox Everett leaning against the frame, wearing clean, dry clothes and a new hat. The sight of him sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "Mr. Everett," she said, rising from her seat. "This is a surprise?" "Knox," he reminded her with a smile. "I was in town picking up supplies and thought I'd stop by to thank you properly for your help yesterday." "Did you find your horse?" Zara asked, genuinely concerned. He nodded. "Phoenix was grazing in a meadow about 2 miles from where he crossed the river. Took me half the night to catch the stubborn beast, but he's safely back at the ranch now. I'm glad to hear it." She gestured to the classroom. "As you can see, I've survived my first morning as a teacher, though I'm not sure I've earned their respect yet." "That takes time," Knox said, "especially with the older boys. They'll test you." "You sound like you speak from experience." A shadow crossed his features. "I was one of those boys once. Made my share of trouble for teachers who were just trying to do their jobs." He straightened up. "But that's not why I came by. I wanted to invite you to dinner at my ranch this Saturday, as a thank you." Zara's surprise must have shown on her face because he quickly added, "My foreman's wife, Maria, will be there, of course, and her husband, Jose. It wouldn't be proper otherwise." The invitation was tempting. After nearly a week of Mrs. Peterson's adequate but uninspired cooking, the prospect of a different meal was appealing. More than that, though, was her curiosity about Knox himself and his ranch. "That's very kind," she said, "but I don't have transportation." "I'll send my buggy for you," he replied, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Around 5 o'clock?" Zara hesitated only a moment longer before nodding. "Thank you, I accept." His smile broadened, creating creases at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. "Excellent. I'll tell Maria to prepare her special beef stew, best in the territory." The rest of the week passed in a blur of teaching, lesson planning, and gradually getting to know her students. By Friday, she had established a routine that seemed to work for most of the children, though a few of the older boys continued to test her patience with disruptive behavior. Saturday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect weather for an evening outing. Zara spent longer than usual on her appearance, selecting a dress of forest green that complemented her hazel eyes. She wore her hair partially up, with soft curls framing her face, more casual than her teaching style, but still respectable. Mrs. Peterson raised an eyebrow when Zara mentioned her dinner plans, but offered no criticism. "Knox Everett is well respected around these parts," she said. "Built that ranch from nothing after the war. Works harder than most men half his age." Precisely at 5, a buggy pulled up outside the boarding house. To Zara's surprise, Knox himself was driving rather than sending an employee as she had expected. "Good evening, Miss Gallagher," he greeted her, jumping down to help her into the vehicle. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she replied, settling onto the seat beside him. And thank you for coming personally. I hadn't expected that. Knox clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward at a steady pace. I don't ask others to do what I can do myself, he said simply. Besides, Maria insisted I come fetch you properly rather than sending a ranch hand. She sounds like a wise woman. The wisest? He agreed with obvious affection. She and Jose have been with me since I started the ranch. They're more family than employees. As they left the town behind, Zara found herself relaxing. The landscape was beautiful in the early evening light, with rolling hills giving way to scattered clusters of trees. Wildflowers dotted the grasslands, adding splashes of yellow and purple to the predominant green. It's beautiful out here, she said. Different from what I'm used to, but beautiful in its own way. What was it like? Where you grew up? Knox asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. This time, Zara answered more honestly. Boston is all buildings and cobblestone streets, civilization pressed close around you, the proper part of town anyway. She looked out at the open space surrounding them. There's so much room to breathe here. That's why I stayed after the war, Knox said. Couldn't imagine going back east where people live stacked on top of each other. You fought in the war? Zara asked. Though she shouldn't have been surprised. He would have been the right age. Knox nodded, his expression sobering. Union cavalry. 4 years that felt like 40. My brother Edward served as well, Zara said quietly. He didn't come home. I'm sorry, Knox said, and she could tell he meant it. Too many good men didn't. They rode in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Eventually, the landscape began to change, with more trees and cultivated areas appearing. They crested a hill, and suddenly the Triple E Ranch came into view below them. It was larger than Zara had expected, a sprawling main house built of solid timber, several barns, bunkhouses, and various outbuildings spread across a valley with a creek running through it. Fenced pastures contained cattle and horses, while what appeared to be a vegetable garden flourished near the house. Welcome to my home, Knox said, a note of pride in his voice. It's impressive, Zara replied honestly. You've built all this yourself? With a lot of help, he amended, and a lot of long days and sleepless nights. As they approached the main house, a plump, middle-aged woman with graying black hair emerged onto the wide porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her brown face broke into a warm smile as they drew near. So, this is the teacher who saved you from drowning, she called, as Knox helped Zara down from the buggy. I wasn't drowning, Maria, Knox protested good-naturedly. Just taking an unexpected swim. Maria Ramirez enveloped Zara in a hug before she could prepare herself. The gesture so maternal and sincere that Zara found herself returning it despite her usual reserve with strangers. Welcome to Triple E, Miss Gallagher, Maria said, releasing her. It is good to meet the woman who waited on the riverbank until this foolish man waded out safely. Zara glanced at Knox, who shrugged with a sheepish expression. I might have embellished the story slightly. He said you were like an angel on the shore, guiding him to safety, Maria continued, clearly enjoying Knox's discomfort, though he failed to mention how beautiful you are. Maria, Knox warned, but there was no real anger in his tone. Come inside, the older woman said, linking her arm through Zara's. Jose is setting the table, and the stew is ready. You must be hungry after your journey. The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly elegant for a bachelor's residence. The furnishings were solid and masculine, but arranged with an eye for comfort and beauty that suggested Maria's influence. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, while bookshelves lined another filled with more volumes than the schoolhouse possessed. Dinner was served in a dining room, with large windows overlooking the ranch. Jose Ramirez, a dignified man with silver-streaked black hair and a neatly trimmed mustache, greeted Zara with old-world courtesy. It is our pleasure to have you at our table, Miss Gallagher, he said, pulling out her chair. Knox rarely brings guests home. The meal was everything Knox had promised. Tender beef, vegetables from the garden, and freshly baked bread, still warm from the oven. The conversation flowed easily, with Maria and Jose sharing stories of the ranch's early days and their journey from Mexico decades earlier. When we first met Knox, he was sleeping in a tent and trying to build fence posts by himself, Jose recalled with amusement. A city boy playing at being a rancher. I wasn't that bad, Knox protested. You didn't know a bull from a steer, Maria countered, turning to Zara. He paid triple what those first cattle were worth, because he didn't know better. Zara laughed, enjoying their easy banter and the way Knox accepted their teasing with good humor. It spoke of deep bonds formed through years of shared hardship and success. After dinner, Knox suggested a walk to show Zara the ranch. Maria exchanged a knowing look with her husband, but merely nodded her approval. Don't stay out too late, she cautioned. The night air can be cool. The evening was indeed cooling rapidly as they strolled away from the house, but Zara welcomed the fresh air after the rich meal. Knox led her along a path toward a small rise that overlooked the property. How long have you been here? Zara asked as they walked. 8 years, Knox replied. I came west after the war ended. Couldn't face going back to Pennsylvania and the family farm. Too many ghosts there. What made you choose ranching? He considered the question. I wanted open space and independence. Working with horses in the cavalry was the only part of the war I enjoyed. Seemed natural to build something around that. They reached the top of the rise. Where a single oak tree spread its branches against the darkening sky, the view was spectacular, the ranch buildings below, pastures stretching into the distance, and the first stars appearing overhead. It's beautiful, Zara said softly. Most beautiful place I've ever seen, Knox agreed, though when she glanced at him, he was looking at her rather than the view. A pleasant warmth spread through her chest at his obvious admiration, but she turned her gaze back to the landscape, unwilling to acknowledge the attraction growing between them. It was too soon, too unexpected. Tell me about Boston, Knox said, seeming to sense her discomfort. What made you leave? Zara hesitated, then decided honesty was best. My father died last winter. His investments failed during the financial panic, and he left significant debts. My mother went to live with my married sister in Philadelphia, but there wasn't room or resources for me. So you came west to earn your own way, Knox said with newfound respect in his voice. It was that or become a poor relation dependent on my brother-in-law's charity, Zara replied. Teaching seemed the best option for an unmarried woman with an education but few practical skills. They began walking back toward the house, the cooling air providing an excuse to return to the warmth inside. You're braver than you give yourself credit for, Knox said after a while. Many women would have chosen the security of family, even at the cost of independence. Perhaps I'm simply too proud, Zara suggested. Nothing wrong with pride when it's earned, Knox replied. And you've earned yours. Inside, Maria had prepared coffee and an apple pie that she insisted Zara try, despite protests that she couldn't eat another bite. The evening concluded with conversation around the fire, with Jose sharing tales of local history that fascinated Zara with their blend of fact and folklore. When it came time to leave, Knox insisted on driving her back to town himself, despite Maria's offer to send one of the ranch hands. I brought her here. I'll see her safely home, he said firmly. The drive back was quieter than their journey out, but it was a comfortable silence. The night was clear, with a full moon illuminating the landscape in silver light. Thank you for a lovely evening, Zara said, as they approached the outskirts of River's Edge. Your home is wonderful, and Maria and Jose are delightful. They liked you, Knox replied. Maria especially. She's been after me to find a good woman for years. Zara wasn't sure how to respond to that implication, so she simply smiled and looked ahead at the town's scattered lights. When they reached the boarding house, Knox helped her down from the buggy, his hands strong and warm around her waist. For a moment, they stood close together in the moonlight, an unspoken connection humming between them. Good night, Miss Gallagher, Knox said, his voice slightly rougher than usual. I hope we'll see you at Triple E again. I'd like that, Zara replied honestly. She watched from the porch as he drove away, her thoughts in turmoil. Knox Everett was unlike any man she had known in Boston, straightforward, unpretentious, and refreshingly genuine. The attraction she felt toward him was undeniable. But she had come west to establish herself independently, not to fall into a hasty romance. Over the following weeks, Zara settled into life in River's Edge. Her students gradually accepted her authority, especially after she proved willing to adapt her teaching methods to their needs rather than stubbornly adhering to Eastern standards. The townspeople, too, began to accept her as one of their own. Knox became a regular visitor to town, finding reasons to stop by the schoolhouse or offer Zara rides to community gatherings. Their friendship deepened through conversations about books, ideas, and their differing experiences of the world. Though neither spoke openly of romantic feelings, the connection between them was obvious to everyone in the small community. Maria invited Zara to the ranch several more times, teaching her Western cooking methods and sharing stories of her homeland. Jose showed her how to ride properly, a skill she had never mastered in Boston, starting with gentle horses before working up to more spirited mounts. "You have natural balance," Jose complimented her after a particularly successful riding lesson. "Soon, you will be ready for a horse of your own." On a crisp Saturday in early October, nearly 2 months after their first meeting, Knox arrived at the boarding house with an unexpected invitation. "I need to move a small herd to the north pasture before winter sets in," he explained. "Thought you might like to come along, see more of the territory." Zara hesitated. "I've never done anything like that before." "Jose says you're ready," Knox assured her, "and I'll be with you the whole time. Just a small herd, only about 50 head, with several experienced hands along." The adventure was too tempting to refuse. The next morning, Knox collected her before dawn, providing her with a borrowed split riding skirt that would be more practical than her usual attire. They arrived at the ranch as the sun was beginning to illuminate the eastern sky. The cattle were already gathered, with ranch hands on horseback, keeping them together in a loose group. Jose approached leading a pretty bay mare. "This is Daisy," he told Zara. "She knows cattle work and will take care of you." After helping her mount, Knox swung onto Phoenix's back. The chestnut stallion danced sideways, eager to be moving. "Stay close to me," Knox instructed. "Let Daisy do the work. She knows what to do better than you do." The cattle drive was unlike anything Zara had experienced. The sound of lowing cattle, the smell of dust and animals, the rhythm of the horse beneath her, all combined into a symphony of sensations that made her feel vibrantly alive. Though her muscles